Good day, everyone. Today we will be discussing about our first topic, which will be all about provisions and contingency. This content will be a short topic since we'll only discuss the definition and some sample problems so we can understand how this certain accounting works. So we have here our target course outcomes, which states that to explain the definition, recognition, measurement, and examples of provisions and contingencies. Next, successfully answer questions and solve problems. For our learning objectives at the end of this module, you are expected to understand the provisions and contingency liability and to know the treatment of provisions and contingency liability in every accounting problem. So let's start. When we say provisions, it is an existing liability of uncertain timing or amount. It means that there is a debt with no certain time to when it will be paid, or rather, there is no certainty of what amount would be borrowed. Also, how do we recognize provisions? We have here the entity has a present obligation, legal or constructive, as a result of past events. This is the simple concept of liability. So, may utang ka or what we call provisions, and kung may meron kang present obligation, meaning nag-exist na yung utang kasi may nangyari na nung nakaraan or past events. When we say legal, it means it arises because of a contract. While constructive is, for example, wala ka dapat utang but you obligate yourself and you accept the responsibility to pay. So provisions have also the same concept of liability. It is probable that an outflow of resources embodying economic benefits would be required to settle the obligation. So dahil nga utang, meron kang kailangan ilabas. So it means that there is an outflow of resources. To further understand the word probable, it is an event that is more likely to not occur. We have here 5. So the first one is probable has more than 50% likely or substantially more. Possible has 50% or less likely to occur. Remote has 10% or less likely to occur or very slight occurrence. We have here, of course, the certain, which is 100%, and impossible for 0%. You will only recognize if it is stated that it is probable because it is more likely to occur. Lastly, we have here the amount of obligation can be measured reliably. Measurement is the management best estimate. When we say best estimate, it is the amount that the entity would rationally pay to settle the obligations at the end of the reporting period or to transfer it to a third party at that time. So, how do we measure that? Take note that if a single obligation is measured, the individual most likely outcome adjusted for effect of other possible outcomes. So I'll repeat it. If a single obligation is measured, the individual most likely outcome adjusted for the effect of other possible outcomes. We also have another one, which if the range of possible outcomes, the midpoint of the range is used, assuming each point in that range is likely as the other. It should be the same range as the other. And lastly, if the large population items or expected volume method is used, it weighs all the possible outcomes by their associated possibilities. So always remember these three most important recognition of provisions. This will be very useful when we move on to sample problems. So I'll repeat these three ones. The entity has a present obligation, legal or constructive, as a result of past events. 2. It is probable that an outflow of resources embodying economic benefits would be required to settle the obligation. And lastly, the amount of obligation can be measured reliably. So aside from these three recognitions, we also have these other 9, but the other 3 was the most important of all. So here we have the other recognitions, which number 1, risk and uncertainties. Number 2, present value of obligation. Number 3, future events. Our number 4 is that the expected disposal of assets. Number 5, reimbursement. Of course, number 6 is the change in provisions. 7 for the use of provisions. Number 9, future operation losses. And number 8 is future operation losses. And lastly, number 9 is the onerous contract. We have here the examples of provisions, which are 5. Number 1, warranties. Number 2, environment contamination. Number 3, decommissioning or abandonment cost. Number 4, court case. And lastly, number 5 is the guarantee. So now that we have understood the provision, we are now going to discuss the contingent liability. When we say contingent liability, it is a possible obligation that arises from past events and whose existence will be confirmed only by the occurrence or non-occurrence of one or more uncertain future events, not wholly within the control of entity. So, yung definition ng contingency is the same as the provision in a sense that both contingency and provision have uncertainty. Walang kasiguraduhan yung pagkakautang pero alam mo na meron. Kasi yung pagkakaroon ng utang is nakadepende sa occurrence or non-occurrence ng future event at hindi ito kontrolado ng entity. So contingency is provisions is same in the manner that they are both uncertain. We have also have another definition which states that it is also a present obligation that arises from past events but is not recognized because it is not probable that an outflow of resources embodying economic benefits will be required to settle the obligation or the amount of obligation cannot be measured reliably. cannot be measured reliably. To sum it up, contingent liability is a possible obligation. It is a probable but not measurable, while provision naman is probable and measurable. This is very important to understand this. I'll repeat, contingent liability is probable but not measurable, while provision is probable and measurable. Now that we have discussed the definition of contingent and provisions, let us apply it to some problems stated on the screen later on. So I'll be back for the sample problems I prepared for you, and it will be a 6 problems. Hello again, I'm back. So let's start our sample problems, starting with problem number 1. Maligno Company issued the 2022 financial statements on March 1, 2023. The entity provided the following data for the year ended December 31, 2015. So it stated that the amount owing to another entity for services rendered during December 2022 amounting to 300,000. Next is estimated long service leave owing to employees in respect of past services is equivalent to 1,200,000. Estimate cost of relocating an employee from head office to a branch in another city, and employee will physically relocate in January 2023, amounting to 100,000. And lastly, estimated cost of overhauling machines every 5 years for 150,000. The question is, what amount should be recognized as provisions on December 31, 2022? I have presented a answer in the next slide, which states a number of 1,200,000, the long-term service leave of 1,200,000. So why is it na 1,200,000? So the estimated long service leave owing to employees in respect of past services is considered as a provision because it is a present obligation which is uncertain in amount. Uncertain in amount and timing. So what 1,200,000 because it is considered as a provision and it is uncertain in amount or timing. However, those amounts owing to another entity are not considered as a provisions because its amount is certain. For example, the estimated cost of relocating the employee is a future cost because it is to be incurred next year. And lastly, estimated cost of overhaul is not considered as a provision because there is no present obligation. So the answer is the long-term service leave of 1,200,000. So the problem number 2 states that in May 2022, Underwood Company relocate an employee from the Manila head office to a branch in Zamboanga City. At the end of the reporting period on June 30, 2022, the costs are estimated at 350,000, analyzed as follows. Cost for shipping goods is 30,000, airfare is 10,000, temporary accommodation cost for May and June is 80,000, temporary accommodation cost for July and August for 90,000, reimbursement for lease break cost paid in July, lease was terminated in May, 20,000, reimbursement for the cost of living expenses for the period May 1, 2022 to May 1, 2023 amounting to 120,000 and has the equivalent of 350,000. What amount should be recognized as a provision for relocation cost on June 30, 2022? I have here the solution as well as the answer in the next slide. We have the cost for shipping goods amounting to 30,000, airfare for 10,000, temporary accommodation costs for May and June for 80,000, and reimbursement for lease break cost for 20,000, and reimbursement for the cost of living expenses for the period May and June for 20,000. Why is it 20,000? We multiplied it 120,000 to 2 over 12. 2 over 12 because it is a living expense, cost of living expenses for the period May 1 to May 2023. It started in May 2022 and the end of the reporting period was June 30, 2022. So it was 2 over 12, 2 months over 12, 120,000 times 2 over 12 is equals to 20,000. The total provision for relocation costs is 160,000. In problem number 3, during 2022, Manning Company guaranteed a supplier's 500,000 loan from the bank. On October 1, 2022, the entity was notified that the supplier has defaulted on the loan and filed for bankruptcy protection. Counsel believed that the entity would probably have to pay 250,000 under the guarantee. As a result of the supplier's bankruptcy, the entity entered a contract in December 2022 to retool its machines so that the entity could accept parts from other suppliers. Retooling costs are estimated to be 300,000. So what amount should be reported as a liability on December 31, 2022? The answer is 250,000. The guarantee should be credited as a provision because the loss is probable and the amount can be reasonably estimated. In problem number 4, during 2022, Kirari Company became involved in a tax dispute with the BIR. On December 31, 2022, the tax advisor believed that an unfavorable outcome was probable, and a reasonable estimate of additional taxes was 500,000. After the 2015 financial statements were issued, the entity received and accepted a BIR settlement of 550,000. The question is, what amount of accrued liability should have been reported on December 31, 2022? The answer would be 500,000. Why? A reasonable estimate of 500,000 is recorded, while the amount of 550,000 is not recognized for this year because it was made after the statements were issued. In the next problem, problem number 5, Avocado Company sells motorcycle helmets. In 2022, the entity sold 4 million helmets before discovering a significant defect in their construction. By December 31, 2022, 2 lawsuits have been filed against the entity. The first lawsuit, which the entity has little chance of winning, is expected to be settled out of court for 1,500,000 in January 2023. The legal counsel believe that the entity has a 50-50 chance of winning the second lawsuit, which is for 1 million pesos. So the question is, what is the accrued liability on December 31, 2022 as a result of the lawsuits? If you could still remember what I've mentioned in the second recognition of provisions, we have here the probable outcomes. So probable has more than 50% likely or substantially more, while yung possible has 50% or less likely to occur, remote has 10% or less likely to occur, or very slight occurrence. Of course, certain has 100%, impossible has 0%. Why is it 1 million pesos yung answer? In the two lawsuits, the first lawsuit states that the entity has a little chance of winning, while the other lawsuit states that there is a 50-50 chance of winning. Means there is a 50% chance that they will win the lawsuits, that the event will occur, that event. So as I've mentioned, probable has more than 50% likely or substantially more to occur. Take note always that you will only recognize if it is stated that it is probable because it is more likely to occur. So the answer would be 1 million pesos because the second lawsuit can be accrued as a provision because it is probable and the amount can be reasonably estimated. Moving forward to our very last problem, I hope you understand what I'm saying here. It states that on November 1, 2022, Montage Company was awarded a judgment of 1,500,000 in connection with a lawsuit. So the decision is being appealed by the defendant, and it's expected that the appeal process will be completed by the end of 2023. The attorney believed that it is highly probable that an award will be upheld on appeal, but the judgment may be reduced by 40%. The question is, what amount should be reported as a receivable on December 31, 2022? As you can see on the screen, the answer is 0. Why is it 0? Contingent assets are only disclosed when probable and measurable. It is considered a contingent asset and it will only be considered probable and measurable if they were disclosed. So that's all for today. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you have learned something from me. So the sources I've got in this report is that it is from the Intermediate Accounting Volume 2 2020 edition by Valix, and the sample problems is from the University of Manuel S. Enverga Foundation, Candelaria. Thank you all for listening once again, and I hope you have learned something from me from the provisions and contingency lesson. So I'll see you in the next video, which I will be discussing about the book value per share and the earnings per share. Thank you.